Alright, before we begin, I'd like to note that this is an opinion video, so take it as that. And if spoilers bother you, it will be discussed, so here's your warning. Hello everyone, this is Alan of Reimaru Files, and I just finished watching Gridman recently. I totally love the show. It's a successful revival of things I enjoyed in my childhood. And in this age where there's a lot of revivals of old IPs that are completely transformed into something I don't recognize or, really appreciate, this was a really good breath of fresh air for me. So here I am deciding to talk about and write about Gridman, and we're going to break down why it's pretty great. Now, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, there was a spin-off Ultraman series back in 93. It crossed Mecha, Tokusatsu, and Ultraman and put them all on computers. It was because computers were such a new thing back in 93. Mixing the digital space with giant combat heroics, that came to be what we know as Gridman. Now, for those who never heard of this despite being an Ultra series fan, it's probably because it wasn't exactly part of the continuity. It was an alternate universe. Alright, so I'm not sure how somebody got the green light for this, but Tsuburaya granted rights for Keiichi Hasegawa, who's worked on Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Zoids, and more, as well as a Trigger mainstay, Kira Amemiya, who's basically been with Trigger for a long time and has handled stuff like Idolmaster up to TTGL, and is a big Eva fan. That's quite a combination to make, and I was not disappointed with their work. Not at all. If you're part of the old school otaku crowd, which I don't know what to call them, otaku sticks. Alright, let's go with otaku. If you're an otaku, which by my personal definition, I would say a person born before the 90s, you are likely to recognize a bunch of Gridman references within the show itself, and not only that, a bunch of other mecha tropes as well. Because, if you want nostalgia, Trigger's got them for you. Are you ready? Old series Gridman, we can't sell them enough. Old school PCs, combiner vehicles, poses, kaiju campiness, signature moves, we have them all. I bet you can't wait for the toy line. I sure can't. Sunrise sword pose? Of course. Transformers, we wear them all the time. Evangelion, we're Trigger, so of course we have it. Heck, some of our music sounds like it. Did you see the color scheme on that guy? Neon Genesis High School? What? It just doesn't end. There's so much more. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if I missed a bunch of them and I'd only spot them on the second or third viewing, or maybe with, Reddit research. Now, when you use references like this so heavily in your series, you risk alienating your younger viewers because they basically weren't there when these things that were being referenced were happening or were popular. And according to my friend's testimony, there was some of that happening to him. But in my opinion, they tried to use these references as wisely as possible. Aside from probably the exposition scene that kinda came out of nowhere, the way they use these references either have no real consequence to the plot, are used in a context that's easy to understand to the story, or they just plain look cool. Do you need me to explain what way of posing with a sword is cool? The music theme for one of the kaiju kinda sounds like it's from Evangelion, but if you didn't know that or you didn't realize that, I doubt it'll ruin your experience overall. The references are there as an additional layer of engagement for those in the know, but doesn't play to the point that knowing about them is integral to understanding the show itself. It also helps make a richer experience on a second viewing when you don't have to pay as much attention to what's directly in front of you and you see what's in the background or what's on the side, and those little details help you connect the dots as you try to see the story a second time. The production quality alone was enough for me to keep coming back for this series. They generally avoided keeping scenes in one static shot, except when it was completely on purpose. Characters animate expressively and stay pretty consistent. It was kinda genius how they implemented the 3D kaiju and Gridman himself as giant, janky-looking CG people, because making them move as if there's a guy in a suit moving inside it plastering 2D effects on Gridman, just like how it was in the old show. It was like, hey, if we're going to go with the nostalgia train, let's go all the way. And it worked. Also, every part of the Gridman arsenal was updated on their looks, and I wasn't really bothered at all when they went into full toy commercial mode, dedicating an episode to feature a new kaiju and the matching feature for Gridman to fight it with. It was a pleasure to watch them all do their thing, though admittedly this probably won't work very well for those who aren't exactly fans of the mecha genre. I mean, there is that drip feed information for character development and the world build, but it'll generally come off as bland for some people. Now, when it came to the writing, a few things did stand out to me in the series. The first would be their way of subverting their Monster of the Week formula. They play out the first episode as how a show using this formula would, then suddenly throw in a curveball in the end. Honestly, if the characters didn't comment how the damage was mysteriously repaired the next day, we probably wouldn't have cared. Then on episode 2, we learned that death is actually permanent, and there's probably something malicious behind it, and sweeping it under the rug. This would definitely raise the stakes of the narrative, and some people will be at the edge of their seat if they didn't know Trigger. Okay, now some people would be wise to Trigger's way of handling endings, and it's really up to you if you're going to like it. I'll just say I like it, but I'm willing to admit that it's amazing and really dumb at the same time, which is honestly classic Trigger. Okay, imagine that you're a kid trying to build a nice sandcastle along the beach. Trigger is the ocean that washes it away before you're done. That's them. Trigger is the granny that slathers mayonnaise all over your salad so that it tastes better. Defeats the purpose of the salad, but hey, at least you like it. That's them. They're just in a different dimension, okay? Alright, anyway, I also like the characters of Gridman. No, not the walking plot device, and no, not the otaku stand-in. I'm talking about these two, Rika and Akane, and if you're gonna go by Reddit subcount, it looks like Reddit really agrees with this. I mean, what other possible reason would people love them if they weren't interesting characters? Am I right? Akane is pretty much the most interesting character because I get where she's coming from. Having difficulty dealing with the social situations, especially where you're supposed to be exerting yourself, is something I'd rather avoid if I could. Her disconnect of wishing to be able to get along and connect with others but not knowing how to actually forge those connections is a pretty otaku problem. Actually, when you think about it, she's kind of an isekai character, isn't she? Comes from another world, has godlike powers, and, well, apparently the villain. And that's actually a pretty interesting twist considering these are the protagonists most of the time. And usually they're unusually emotionally mature. And instead, what we get is someone who has no idea what to do to make the world a better place for herself, despite all the power that she has, and is pushed to the edge for it. Now, the other character I really like, Rika, is pretty much waifu of the season. Yeah, that's true. But I tend to think of her as a protagonist. Aside from having a personality that's fun enough to watch, she's actually the character that interacts with everyone. They could have kept her as a fan service bystander that comments on the situation, but instead, she takes a more active role in helping Gridman without actually fighting. She also deals with a bigger reveal about her world, and she doesn't fall apart from it. And finally, she becomes a genuine friend to Akane by really caring for her. I don't know if it's obvious to others, but the ending pretty much closes this case. Speaking of the ending, yes, that Trigger ending, as I previously said, it's not exactly well written. I'm not even sure if I could say that for most of the story, but I don't think Trigger stuff is the type you'll enjoy if you're paying too much attention to the technicalities. It's a lot easier to appreciate if you're willing to focus more on the message they attempt to convey, because they're pretty clumsy with writing, really. It attempts to touch on an issue that many of us may be affected in the current day and age. At least it's a popular topic, really. And when you take off what basically are ass-pulls in the narrative, you can see that it's really about facing what you don't like about yourself and dealing with it triumphantly. Now, I can go over this in more detail, but one, I'm not sure if you guys actually want to hear that, and two, this has gone on long enough. So that's it for now. If you like what you got and want more, do let me know. And if enough people do want that, I'll go ahead and try to make it. So that's about it for now. Alright guys, that's it. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. If you guys want to see more content, you can go to our site, reimarufiles.com. You can also contact me on Twitter or contact us on Facebook. Do look for us there. Thank you so much.